to The Source. I'm Ezra Levant in our Calgary studio today, but joining me on the line from our New York studios is a 9/11 widow, Maureen Basnicki, whose husband Ken was murdered on that fateful day in 2001. She joins me now to talk about those events. Maureen, thank you very much for being with us
You're
today.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure and it's our honor that you would spend this time with us. It's a difficult thing to ask someone about the murder of a family member. Frankly, I've never done it before, and I would be shy to do so if it weren't so important that all of us hear and remember. So I hope you'll forgive me, because I'm going to ask you about some very personal things. Let me start by asking you about that day itself, September 11th, 2001. I understand you were a flight attendant and you were in Germany that day, and your husband Ken was in New York. Can you tell me what he was doing there and how you learned about things that fateful morning?
Yes, Ken was in New York because he'd just been promoted as financial marketing director for his firm. He worked for an American company at that time called BEA, and he'd been promoted to a management position, and he went to network, to schmooze. Of course, he lived in Toronto with our family, our two children, Erica and Brennan, and he was very excited to be taking on the challenge of a management position. He had been a very successful salesperson. And I was in Germany on a layover, small town outside of Frankfurt called Mainz. I was actually at the Hilton Hotel where American and United flight attendants also lay over. And I woke up in the morning of September the 11th and turned on CNN. I liked the station, and it was the only English station that I could listen to. So, as did the rest of the world, I watched the second plane go into the South Tower.
Did you know that your husband was actually in the World Trade Center building itself? Did you know the physical location of his meeting in New York? You must have been felt. Were you shocked? Were you terrified? What was your initial reaction when you saw the news that we all saw?
Of course, I knew that he had a conference at the World Trade Center, and this was to be at Windows of the World on the 106th floor of the North Tower. And he, in fact, had called our son Brennan the night before to say that he was on top of the world, that he had this magnificent view, and that he had a conference the following day there. He said he was on top of the world in life. He was very excited where he was at in business, and he was hoping to spend more time with the family in his new position. He wouldn't have to be away so much with his sales. I also know that he was on the 106th floor because shortly after I watched the planes hit, I called back to Canada, and I was informed that he had called his mother. He called his mother because he knew I was in Germany. And he said, "Mom, I'm on the 106th floor." He was quite calm, actually, according to his mother, Jean. He said that the room was full of smoke, and he didn't know how he was going to get out, that the roof was blocked. And his mother said, "Keep in touch, dear," and then the phone went dead.
Oh, my God.
So I know exactly where he was.
What did you do next? Who did you call? Who did you talk to?
Well, if you recall, the skies closed shortly after 9/11 happened, and I was stranded over in Germany. I didn't arrive home until Friday evening. That was the earliest that they could get me back. So it was a very traumatic time for me. I guess they had to try to keep me from swimming across the ocean. I was desperate to get home, but
and your children were...
that was impossible.
How old were your children at that time?
Our son Brennan was 16 at the time, and our daughter Erica was 21.
And, I mean, I know there can only be one answer to the question, but tell me, what they went through. I mean, I can imagine just how terrible it is to lose your father in any circumstances, but to have him murdered in such a spectacular attack. What was their reaction?
Well, I think we were all very hopeful at the time, as the world, and we knew that Ken was he was such a physical fitness fanatic. We all thought if anybody could have gotten down 106 floors, he could have, and so for the first couple of days we were trying to support one another, separated by the ocean, but we soon realized that Ken would have contacted us if he could have, and started to begin the process of dealing with this loss. It's never a good time to lose a husband and a father, but of course there's a whole new set of trauma that goes with this, and we've been dealing with it ever since.
I appreciate you telling me this very personal story, and I'm terribly sad just hearing it again. But tell me, for the rest of us who didn't experience it personally, but rather experienced it politically or publicly, what do you think of the passage of 10 years? Has our country learned the lessons of that day? What are those lessons? Have we remembered properly? How have the rest of us dealt with 9/11, Maureen?
Well, when you talk about the rest of us, I always like to look at things through the lens of a maple leaf. I'm a very proud Canadian, and so was Ken. One of the reasons why he was promoted was that he could build bridges between the United States and Canada. We sometimes do things differently, and he was very good at bringing important values and work ethic to the table, so to speak, and they was able to coordinate in a very effective and successful way different ways of doing business. And when you talk about our reaction to 9/11, I really look at Canada, and I want Canadians to realize that that this was a very global event. It didn't just affect the Basnicki family. It affected the world, and it's something that none of us can forget. And at national level, and on the national federal level, it's taken quite some time to deal with terrorism. We have this sense in Canada that we're Canadians and everybody loves us and nothing's going to happen. And certainly we have to find the balance between living a life of fear, or living with the expectation that we're going to be hit. Nobody wants that. But we can't deny the fact that we do have Canadians who are victims of terror, and we have terrorists who are Canadian living in Canada. And Canada has a role to play in the global community to do everything possible to prevent Canadians from ever experiencing what the Basnicki family has experienced. And
we have
that's
to take
why we... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We have to take a short break right now, but I would like to talk to you more after the commercial break about how you and others are keeping the memory alive and trying to steer Canada on the right path. I want to talk to you more about your coalition that you formed. Please don't go away. We have to take a break. And you, viewer, don't go away either. You don't want to miss this story. This is Ezra Levant on The Source. Welcome back. We're talking with Maureen Basnicki, whose husband was murdered in the 9/11 attacks 10 years ago. Maureen, before the break, you were telling me about how you want to remember those terrible events. You're involved with something called the Canadian Coalition Against Terror. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes, I made it a mission in life to do everything possible to prevent future acts of terror. And I was approached shortly after 9/11 with the thought that there was really no organization in Canada that dealt with terrorism. And along with Danny Eisen, my co-founder, the Canadian Coalition Against Terror was formed. And this is comprised of many Canadian terror victims, not only 9/11, but certainly we have Air India family members, and we have other victims who have experienced terrorism across the world who
What
live in
are you
Canada.
hoping to do? I mean, besides sharing your experiences with one each other and perhaps giving each other strength, what changes would you like our society or our government to make to help prevent terrorism in the future?
Well, Canada has taken a strong role in the military area. Of course, 9/11 was the reason why we sent our troops to Afghanistan, and we support that. It's been very necessary, but when you're combating terrorism, you don't stop at military action alone. And in fact, all the while that we talk about our armed forces, the bombs and the bullets, the training, the IEDs, all this is supported financially by terrorists and by the terror economy, which is huge in Canada. So one of the goals, and when you lose somebody in such a horrific way, it's to try to deter or prevent future acts of terrorism. One of the goals is to go after the terror economy. And so the Canadian Coalition Against Terror is focused in two areas. That is to do everything possible to prevent future acts. And we have the Justice for Victims of Terrorism bill that we've been pushing through for a number of years. It has yet to pass. And the other area is to make sure that 9/11 isn't treated as an ordinary day in Canada. And we feel strongly about, I say, redefining 9/11 in Canada, and yet we haven't defined it yet in Canada, but to have it as a national day of service and remembrance.
Ms. Basnicki, how can we learn more about your Canadian Coalition Against Terror? Do you have a website, or how can we get involved to support you? I think we should remember and we should deter, and I find it interesting that you want to focus on the economic aspects of terrorism. How can we learn more about that?
Well, we have a website. It's C-CAT, standing for the Canadian Coalition Against Terror, Canada.org, and it will explain all our goals. Certainly we wanted to lessen the impact for terror victims, and we have many in Canada. But as I mentioned before, we have a strong desire to do everything possible to prevent future acts of terror and to effectively kill them in their pocketbooks. We would feel that that certainly is not going to stop terrorism altogether, but it will certainly make it more difficult.
Maureen Basnicki, I thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your very personal experiences, and helping us as the public understand and calling us to be vigilant. I am so grateful for your time, and I thank you. And on behalf of Canada, let me show you our solidarity for what you've been through and our hope for the future. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much.